and welcome to Joy in Our Town. I'm your host, Vanessa Rose. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's such a pleasure to join you like we do every week in your wonderful home. Today, we are so honored to be joined by the Honorable Michele Reagan, and she is our Arizona Secretary of State. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Wonderful to have you, Secretary Reagan, and to take time out of your busy schedule and what you're doing here for our citizens here in the state of Arizona to come and join us to speak about a few civic affairs issues. But before we get started, if you wouldn't mind just sharing a little bit about yourself and your history, and now that you're Secretary of State here.
Well, I've been in Arizona a little over 20 years now, and originally came here from the Midwest, the south suburbs of Chicago, along with many other people from Arizona. Did run for public office several years ago. I served 8 years in the House of Representatives and then 4 years in the State Senate before running for Secretary of State. So got a passion for small business, obviously, being a voice for small business, and a passion for elections, and also a very big passion for Arizona and what it is to be an Arizonan.
Wonderful. Well, it's such a pleasure to have you. Congratulations on your election.
Oh, thank you.
And for the things that you have started to do and will be doing for the citizens
We've been busy.
here. Yes, I'm sure. I can only imagine that it's probably been a whirlwind coming in there, but I know that great things will happen. So thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you.
And for all of you watching at home, today we are discussing civic affairs, and our first issue is the role of the Arizona Secretary of State's office. This is something a lot of people may not be familiar. A lot of people, you know, there's a lot of positions in the government, and sometimes people aren't aware of what really happens or why you're there necessarily. They see your name on a ballot and they know that, and that's as far as they know a lot of times. So what is the role of the Arizona Secretary of State's office?
And that's why I love the fact that you're having me on your show. Thank you. And we like to talk about the position of Secretary of State, because you're right, so few people know what it is. I get asked all the time. The Secretary of State is Arizona's second highest elected position. It's right underneath the governor. And I am the chief elections officer in the state, as well as the state's acting lieutenant governor. So Arizona doesn't have a lieutenant governor, so I am that as well. In addition, the Secretary of State's office has a vast business services department, and we're also honored to have such diverse things under the office as libraries, archives, notaries, address confidentiality program. I mean, it is a vast and diverse office. So it's one of the more unique offices in the state, very diverse. It's wonderful.
So you, one of the biggest things I think that affects our state is the fact that you are over elections and over election counting and over all of these things and policies and procedures that go into that. So
yes.
Is one thing that you're involved in then is getting people involved in voting and in elections and in things. Is that part of your role?
That is part of the role. We oversee the state's elections, and we work with all 15 county recorders. It's important that the counties actually administer the elections, but then someone has to be watching over to make sure that all the counties are doing it properly and making sure that we are getting people to the polls and making sure that their rights as voters are being maintained, that we have free and fair elections. And we have a saying, you know, it should be easy to vote and hard to cheat. And
yes.
What I mean by that is we want to make sure that people have easy access to the ballot, but then our system is also free from fraud. So those that shouldn't be voting aren't voting. That's the gold standard, and that's what your Secretary of State's office is working day in and day out to make sure of. That is what our elections division does. And then, as you mentioned earlier, that's just one division of
yes.
the Secretary of State's office. There's many, and it's a very vast agency.
Well, that's wonderful. And as you mentioned, we don't have a lieutenant governor in the state of Arizona. Most other states do. So what does that add to your role? Does that just mean that you're acting governor when our governor leaves? How does that affect your role?
You know, Arizona is very unique in this respect. We are one of only 3 states that does not have a lieutenant governor. So it is Arizona and Oregon and Alaska, I believe, that do not have lieutenant governors. And so Secretary of State is also acting lieutenant governor. So in many cases, that's a ceremonial type position. So sometimes a lot of ribbon cuttings, a lot of speeches. Sometimes it's doing things that the governor himself cannot attend. And then it's also things that most people wouldn't even think of. For instance, anytime the governor signs a document, somebody needs to attest his signature, that really was the governor signing. Well, that's the Secretary of State or the Lieutenant Governor that has to do that. So we spend an awful lot of time attesting that, yes, that really was the governor signing something. And then also, anytime the governor leaves the state of Arizona, steps foot out of the state still needs a governor. And so we are, the Secretary of State is acting governor. So it's a very big responsibility and a very, very big job. So we work closely with the governor's office, and we're lucky that we have a good governor who's working hard and doing really well. But again, he has to have the ability to leave the state and do what he needs to do. So
Yes.
somebody needs to be able to, there's that chain of command.
Yes, well, absolutely. And I think people should feel comfortable if he leaves and we leave it to you for the time being. So,
Well, so far, it's been a very, very easy, and we just, public doesn't, it's a seamless transition. He can come and go, and we, just up there doing our job, and
just a
that's-
couple floors away, right?
Exactly.
To the state capitol.
Exactly.
So what has been your experience so far as Secretary of State, and what milestones to this point are you proud of that you've been working on?
We started working on, you got to remember, this is a job that I really wanted to have, really bad. I'm very passionate about the role of Secretary of State. And so as soon as we got up there, just started working right away. We've had a lot of numerous successes right in the first 100 days. Most notably, our office was a little behind in certain areas as far as we didn't accept credit cards. In our business services section. Our website was very outdated. Just some of the things that you just kind of take for granted that should have probably been done a while ago. So we just set out right away to start fixing some of those things. And so we have a very new and improved website, easy to navigate. We now accept credit cards in our business services department. But those kind of things are just the beginning of something bigger and larger that we hope the public is going to see even more from the Secretary of State's office as far as getting things online and the ability to do more services without having to come down to government to actually do it. And it all starts with the ability to actually be able to accept that credit card.
Yes, no,
So-
that's a huge help in today's
we laid out a
cashless society.
timeline of what's going to have to happen in order to reach our end goal of providing really excellent service to the consumer. Whether it's in business services or elections or in our library and archives, our Capitol Museum. Again, we have many different divisions, and a lot of them needed to be upgraded. So we're working very diligently, and we're coming out with some really neat products.
Mentioning your website is a great place to get campaign finance information on statewide and legislative candidates. And from what I've heard is that you're working to include local candidates on your site as well.
This is something we're really excited about. But if you were to look up somebody on a city level or a local level, you might not be able to get that information on who's contributed to them. So, for instance, somebody who's running for Phoenix City Council. And the reason why is because they don't enter their data through a campaign finance system through the state. So you can't just click on a name and have it pop up and see.
There's not as much transparency there.
Exactly. It is our hope that we will be able to, and we ran a bill this session at the legislature, which was successful and passed and the governor signed. It was language that allowed cities and towns to send that information through the state portal, through the state system, so that in time, if we can get enough cities and towns signed up into the system, you would be able to click on a candidate's name or a lobbyist's name and see exactly who's really contributed to them, regardless if it was just a state candidate or not. So you'd have all that information, which is being filed in different jurisdictions, will all be sent to one place. So you'll be able to look it up in one spot instead of having to go look it up all over the state.
Interesting, and you mentioned even click on a lobbyist name. So is that something that people can click on that and find out who they're involved with?
Right. So
Wow.
currently, we're coming out with this great program, and I think the public is really going to love it, when we do release it, because we're hearing a lot from the public about wanting more transparency, who's contributing to who, what kind of lobbyist influence is there in campaigns, in elections. So you will be able to click on a lobbyist's name and see exactly who they contributed to. The key to that is combining that with the bill that I just mentioned that passed in the legislature, so that when you click on a lobbyist's name, you're also getting the local candidates that they've contributed to. Because right now you're only going to get the
state
statewide
government,
candidates
yeah.
and the legislative candidates. But I would like the public to also be able to see the city candidates, city council, justice of the peace, county clerks, anybody who's running for office. All of their campaign finance information, if it comes through one portal, then the citizen can, when they get a true picture of who lobbyists are trying to influence.
Goodness, that is wonderful, incredibly beneficial to
It is.
the citizens, regardless
And
of
it
party
doesn't have to
affiliation,
cost a
anything.
lot.
That's hugely beneficial to people.
The important thing is it doesn't need to cost a lot, and it's information that's already being reported. Those candidates in all those different cities and towns are already reporting that information.
I can imagine there's a bit of a fight back, though, or is that something that's pretty unison?
No, it's not, because again, the city council candidates, like I mentioned in Phoenix, they're already reporting that information.
Okay.
They're just reporting it to their city clerk. And what I'm asking for is...
It's available to the public.
It's already available to the public.
But openly and easily accessible.
Just make it accessible to my system.
Because a lot of people aren't going to take the time to go down to the county recorder and look up paperwork.
Bingo.
And yes, and that takes time, and that also takes knowledge on the average voter's part that they probably don't know that that's even available.
It should all just be coming to one central point, so that you could go to one website and pull it all up, instead of having to go down to the city of Phoenix and check it out, or go down to the city of, Yuma and check it out. You should just have one central point to go look everything up, because everything's already public.
That's wonderful.
You just shouldn't have to go to 300 places.
Yeah, to find it, and
Exactly.
through government agencies and
So
phone
there's
calls.
actually, so far, knock on wood, not a lot of pushback.
Well, wonderful. Thank you so much, Secretary Reagan. It sounds like you're doing phenomenal things. And in our next segment, we're going to kind of continue to talk about this, but even more so looking forward into this time that you have and this term that you're going to be serving. And so thank you so much for joining us for this first segment of Joy in Our Town. And thank you so much at home for watching. If you have any questions, the Arizona Secretary of State's office website has been at the bottom of this screen, and you can go on there to find resources and information that we've been speaking about. So please don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this short message.
Every child deserves the chance to play, to dream big dreams, to grow healthy, to enjoy the happiest, healthiest childhood possible. The United Healthcare Children's Foundation helps children get the medical care they need. If you or a family you know need help paying for your child's medical treatments, therapies, and devices, we can help. To apply for a medical grant, please visit us online at uhccf.org.
This has been a public service message from the United Healthcare Children's Foundation.
Hello and welcome back to Joy in Our Town. I'm your host, Vanessa Rose. So happy that you decided to stay with us. If you just happen to be joining us, today we are joined by the Honorable Michele Reagan, who is our Arizona Secretary of State. Thank you so much for staying with us.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, wonderful information in the first segment. And as we continue here, we are going to continue speaking about civic affairs, but looking into the future in Arizona and in the Secretary of State's office. And you've kind of mentioned this a little bit, but I had the honor of being there at the inauguration, whenever you inaugurated. And one of the things you did emphasize was technology. And as we can tell in the first segment, we mentioned some of it, and the benefit that it's going to have to Arizona as a whole, and to the Secretary of State's office. What is your plan and your kind of timeline and goal? Some of it you've already shared, but implementing these changes, and what benefits do you think they're going to have on the state?
Well, there is so much to talk about here. First of all, we know that generations behind me, certainly, the way they talk and the way they communicate is many ways through technology. So it should be no different when we as government think of how are we going to include them or how are we going to speak to them. We need to be adding technology to that toolbox, so to speak. So let's just focus on right now voter registration. Voter registration, it's on a paper form. Those days are probably on their way out. The days of going door to door with clipboards and asking people, are you registered to vote? There may always be a place for that, but now when we go out to fairs and to booths and have a booth, we're going out armed with tablets, mobile tablets, and engaging people that way. Everything about the way that we communicate and try to engage people is completely different and than it was, even 5 years ago.
Yes.
And I think that's one of the reasons why I'm really excited to be Secretary of State is I think it takes having somebody who kind of was on the edge of that world to understand how some of these younger people are perhaps thinking. Of course, I'm certainly not as young as them, but I know, just enough to be dangerous about technology. We're also coming out with mobile apps. And this from the Secretary of State's office that didn't even accept credit cards until a month ago,
Wow.
right?
I didn't even realize that. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But, apps on your phone that could tell you things such as you could download an app, and we're testing one of these up in a Flagstaff election this May. So, we want to see if it works and works properly before we roll it out statewide. But you download an app and it could tell you that reminders of when an election is coming. So an election, it's 28 days away. Election, it's 8 days away. The election, it's today. Do you know where your polling place is at? Oh, you don't know? Do you need directions to it? Or, by the way, your polling place has moved. Because sometimes that happens. A polling place gets closed the day before or the night before. And they have to scramble to get the word out that this stuff can be delivered via text message to you. And do you want a copy of your sample ballot? We can email it to you. We can text it to you. And how about your candidates that you voted for? Do you, we don't know how you voted, of course, but you could ask set preferences on your app, and you could have the election results texted to you in the morning when the election results come in. Instead of having to search through the newspaper and look at the columns and see who won. These are things that the technology is already there, but it engages the voter in what government is doing. And we know that people are hungry for that kind of stuff, and especially younger people. And we all sit around and say, why aren't younger people voting? Why don't they think government cares about them? Well, we need to start showing that we care and get them involved. We were able to find a group that could develop this app for us using grant money. So the taxpayers aren't even paying for it. And it's these kind of things and these kind of initiatives that I'm working on day and night and traveling the state and the country to find them, sniff them out. Where are they at? And bring them back to our state. It's important. That's how we're going to turn up registration. That's how we're going to include young people. That's how we're going to get voter turnout up.
What is the percentage of people that are registered to vote in Arizona?
I'm going to give you really rough numbers here,
of course.
so we don't get into the real nitty numbers here. But roughly 50% of our state is eligible to vote, and of that 50%, 50% is registered.
Goodness.
So, and then of that,
how many actually turn out to vote?
Right, and it's pretty low.
And it has, and in the last election,
the
the opinion of many people and really the facts, is that the voter turnout has been extremely low.
Yeah, it's under 50%.
Why do you think that is, and what are you trying to do at the Secretary of State's office to help change that? Do you think that can be changed?
Well, we don't really know the exact reason why. You could say, well, it's not a presidential election year. We know that's exciting for people when it is. Well, coming up, we'd certainly have one, but we know last year wasn't a presidential election year. So, people sometimes don't really care. People don't really think their vote matters, et cetera. Hear all the excuses. But, the end of the day, I don't think it really matters why. It's let's just turn it around. Let's change that. And we've got a lot of people registering as independents and leaving the parties. So how do we get independents engaged? And in some cases, do they even want to be engaged? And there's that question too. If you're registering as an independent voter, do you want to be engaged? And we need to reach out to them and find out. And they're a very hard group to reach out to, quite frankly, because They're independent for a reason.
Well, they're independent, and then you also don't have the parties reaching out to them and trying to get them engaged, which also probably helps voters stay engaged because they're part of a party and getting their emails and phone calls.
Right.
And so, and I'm assuming that their turnout at primary elections aren't nearly as high then either.
No, not anywhere near as high. Even as someone who was a candidate many times, did multiple attempts to try to include independents, trying to get them to come to the polls for the primary. And it's just, some of them do, some of them are really good, solid primary voters, but that hovers around 6 to 9%.
Wow.
And they're they make up over a third of our voting electorate in the state.
Wow, and so that's a big demographic
It's a
of
big
voters.
demographic that isn't coming to the polls.
And
so.
they need to be there. So as Secretary of State and someone who deals with the elections here, and the people, and I've heard this many times myself, my vote doesn't count. What would you say to those people? It does count.
It does count, and that's the thing. Whenever I hear that, I always tell people the story about some of my friends in the legislature who literally won their seat by 8 votes. Who come from, their district is 250,000 people, and yet their race came down to 8 votes. Races that we've had in our state's history, not even so long ago, where there was ties, literally ties. And there's,
So one vote could have changed that, literally. That
Right.
one person's vote could have changed that outcome.
Right, and then it doesn't. You don't have to go too far back in history. You can look until just last November, where we had a congressional race between Martha McSally and Ron Barber down in Tucson. I mean, so this is not ancient history. This was just a couple months ago, and she only won by 137 votes, and that's a congressional seat.
Wow.
That $20 million was spent, and the entire country watched as we had a recount. So, I mean, if they don't think every vote counts, that's bunk.
Yes. No, it is. And you see it yourself down
Yeah,
there at the Secretary of State's office. And
that
I
just
think
means if 70 people in Tucson had just kind of changed their mind, that vote, that entire seat could have gone from one party to another. And that was one of the most contested seats in the country.
wow.
So that's a pretty big deal. And yeah, so every vote does count.
Every vote
especially
does
in
count.
Arizona.
Yes, and one thing that most people have heard of as a controversy is surrounding ballot harvesting. Can you explain for the people that don't understand what that is just briefly? And then also, can you bring us up to speed on your effort to end the practice?
Well, I can absolutely explain this because it's near and dear to my heart. Ballot harvesting is you going door to door in a neighborhood. You could just pick any neighborhood you wanted. Go door to door and knock on the door and say, hi, I'm here and I just want to pick up your ballot. And some people may give them to you because they don't feel like they should trust the mail to mail them back in, or they have missed the mail deadline and they want you to take it to the polls for them, and they say, oh, you look decent enough, here you go, drop it off at the polls for me. I personally would never give you my ballot just
No.
because it's my ballot.
No.
And I would want to make sure I took it in. But there are many people that do. The fact is, bottom line is that groups do this as a way of getting out the vote. I'm not accusing them of anything illegal because it's perfectly legal. And in most cases, I'm sure they're doing a fine civic duty of picking up ballots that might not otherwise have been turned in. This is illegal in every other state in the country except for Arizona. The reason why it's illegal is because why would you want somebody that isn't a county worker or an elections official having possession of ballots, even if they're just volunteers trying to do a good thing? Because they could lose them, they could get damaged, they could get wet, it's not a good idea.
They could never make it to their destination. I mean,
Right.
yeah.
So, and they're mail-in ballots. They get mailed to you. You get the convenience of filling them out at your home, and you're supposed to mail them back in. And if you don't mail them back in, you're afforded the privilege in state law of taking them to a polling place, any polling place, and dropping them off on election day. I don't see what the big deal is, why we should have these, gangs of people going and walking neighborhoods and collecting ballots. I just don't see it. I've tried to stop it. I came this close this year. A couple votes shy in the legislature, and I'll be back next year to fix it. Again, we're the only state in the country that allows it. It's unacceptable.
It is. And so doing things to try to change that here, hopefully, and maybe that won't happen anymore
Call me
within
crazy. I just think
legislation.
those ballots are pretty precious.
They are. They are. There are rights as American citizens that we should take a lot of pride in. And thank you so much, Secretary Reagan, for all that you're doing down at our Secretary of State's
Well,
office.
thank you.
And
This was a treat to be on your show. I appreciate it.
It was a pleasure to have you. I look forward to hopefully having you back again to share with our audience as things progress and happen while you're in office.
Come back and give you a 1-year update.
Yes, wonderful. Well, thank you so much. And thank you so much at home for watching. Please make sure to visit. It's azsos.gov. It's been at the bottom of the website. Lots of wonderful resources for you as citizens here to learn about things. So thank you for watching. We always love joining you in your home. And we look forward to seeing you next week on Joy in Our Town.
This program has been sponsored by the Trinity Broadcasting Network and is made possible by your telethon dollars. Your continual support can keep Joy in Our Town coming to your home every week. Write to Joy in Our Town, Post Office Box A, Santa Ana, California, 92711.